Good evening, and welcome to tonight's webinar on growing giving. I'd like to begin tonight with a story of unfolding generosity, and it starts in the beginning. In the beginning, God created the world and all that is in it, an awesome world of towering mountains and microscopic organisms, a playful world of raging seas and quiet meadows, a bountiful world of plants, of fruit, of fish and birds and animals. And after God created humankind in God's own likeness, God said to them, "Look, I have given you every plant yielding seed." Creative generosity. Yet when humankind neglected this generosity, as the waters of a great flood receded, God said, "Earlier I gave you the green plants, but now I give you everything." Expanding generosity. The story continues as God gives to an elderly couple the promise of more descendants than there are stars in the sky. And through one of those descendants, God provides food during a time of famine. Providential generosity. The people forget God's generosity as the myth of scarcity lures them into enslavement. But yet again, God's response is ever more generosity. Liberation from bondage, manna in the desert, commandments to preserve the community's safety, a homeland in which to prosper. Astounding generosity. The story continues through good times and bad, through wise kings and battle defeats, through exile and return, through the praise of the psalmist and the anger of the prophet. At each turn, God's response, more generosity. God's provision multiplies. And whenever people forget and turn away, God's response is to lavish generosity all the more. Relentless generosity. God's love is such that when one gift does not do, God will give another, then another, then another, until God gives God's very self. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. Limitless generosity. And to his followers comes the gift of the Holy Spirit, moving them to a generosity which sees people share everything with one another, sell all their possessions and distribute the proceeds to all who need it. Active generosity. And this story of ever-expanding generosity is still unfolding. And you and I are invited into it. We're given the amazing privilege of recognizing all that God has given us and living generously with the resources at our disposal, freely and cheerfully giving to grow God's kingdom. Joyful generosity. Let's pray. Your hands, Lord, like your heart, are always open, ready to embrace, keen to bless. The table you lay groans with good things. The cup you fill overflows, and not for the expected guests, but for the last and the least, for those to whom the world has shown no generosity. Make our hands and our hearts, our tables and our wallets, well worn, like yours, with love. Call us away from the myth of scarcity and into your still unfolding story of ever-expanding generosity, that our congregations may be places characterized by abundance, that we might light up our parishes with the light of your love. Amen. Tonight, we're going to explore one way of inviting our congregations and communities further into God's story of unfolding generosity through a personal giving programme. My name's Darren Phillip, and I'm a stewardship consultant for the Church of Scotland, and I'm joined tonight by fellow consultants Catherine Southern and Fiona Penny, and by stewardship team leader Pauline Wilson. At the end of tonight's presentation, there will be an opportunity for questions. We're not going to have folk on camera or with mics on, so please submit your questions using the Q&A icon rather than the chat. If you move your mouse or tap your screen to reveal the range of icons at the bottom, you can click or tap on Q&A, type in your question, and then click Submit. And after the webinar, we'll send to each of you a recording of tonight's event, along with all the templates and resources that we will mention along the way. So, over to Catherine, who has a little exercise to get us thinking.
Thanks for that, Darren, and for that opening reflection as well. So as Darren said, I wanted to have us start with just a quick exercise. So what I want you to do is just think to yourself of a movement or a charity that you like or care about or support. And just in your head, in a sentence or two, describe what that charity does. I'll give you a moment for that. So if you thought of, for example, the RNLI, you might say something like, they rescue people at sea. Or if you thought, for example, of guide dogs for the blind, maybe you thought to yourself, they train dogs to support people with vision loss. So now what I want you to do is to try and do the same thing for your church. So just think to yourself in a sentence or two, what is it that your church does? I generally find that people find that second one a lot harder. And what this shows us is that charities are usually very good at telling their stories. They know how to explain their purpose clearly and invite people into it. They're very clear about why they exist and why it matters. So tonight, we're going to think about how we can strengthen how we tell our church's story. Because at the heart of Christian giving is not money, it's mission, it's vision, it's participation in the life and the work of the church. And one of the most powerful reasons that people give is because they believe in that mission. And so that's why a giving program matters. It is not just about asking for money. It is about telling your church's story clearly and compellingly and inviting people to support it and to grow in discipleship. So in this webinar, we're going to tell you or show you how to tell your church's story and to create a successful giving program, one that is spiritual, practical, and effective. We've designed this program around 4 E's: encourage, engage, enlarge, and enhance. We've also worked to create a series of editable templates to make planning and running a program as easy as possible for you. And we'll show you these towards the end of the webinar. But before we get into that, let's talk about what a giving program is, why and when to run one, and what it is that makes a program successful. So, what is a giving program? A giving program is about encouraging and growing monetary giving. It's a focused period of time when your church considers giving within the context of our Christian faith. And this is the most important element of a program, so we're going to talk about it in more detail on the next slide. It's an opportunity for your church to share its vision and explain how giving supports that vision. It invites people to review their own giving, especially whether they might begin to give or increase their regular offerings. And we know that lots of people like to talk about time, talents, and money together. That's the sort of classic program. But the program we are focusing on is primarily related to monetary offerings. We found that churches tend to get better results when the message is very clear and specific. If you ask for everything at once, people often do nothing instead. But when you focus on just one thing, in this case, regular financial giving, people are much more likely to respond. And of course, we can't guarantee results here because every church is different. But we've seen regular giving rise by around 20 to 30% typically when churches follow this kind of approach. So, as I said, let's talk more about why it is we give. At its heart, a giving program is a spiritual exercise. Christian giving flows out of worship. It is one of the ways in which we respond to God's grace. When we bring our offering, we aren't just paying the church's bills or filling a gap in the budget. We are laying our gifts before God in thanksgiving, just as Christians have done since the earliest days of the church. And so that is why offering is part of worship. Generosity is part of our discipleship. So we give because God first gave to us. We give to join in God's mission. We give to offer ourselves, our time, our talents, and our treasure in service to Christ. So a giving program helps your congregation to live this out. It provides space for people to reflect on God's generosity and see how their own giving strengthens the church's witness and mission. It's more than, as we said, simply balancing a budget. It's about helping people recognize that their generosity brings hope, healing, and the love of Christ into the community and beyond. And when done regularly, a giving program is not a simple, desperate response to crisis, but rather a proactive way to build a generous and prayerful culture that sustains both the church's mission and its people's discipleship. And we recommend that as a rule of thumb, churches run a giving program at least every 3 years. This helps to keep giving in line with inflation, support long-term planning, and nurture a culture where generosity is a regular and joyful part of discipleship. The two most effective times we find tend to be autumn and spring. These fit very naturally with the rhythm of the church calendar, and they give you opportunities to connect your message to powerful themes like harvest, renewal, and new beginnings. It's also important to choose a time that doesn't clash with other important events in the church calendar, like Christmas or Easter. Remember, though, that stewardship and giving is something that should be talked about all year round and not just when you run a program. We'll give you some advice on this later on in the webinar. There are three principles that stand above the rest when it comes to a successful giving program. Be positive, be hopeful, and be spiritually grounded. Research shows that people give when they believe in the church's mission, when they feel connected to their community, and when they believe that their gift will make a difference. Very often in the team, we see churches fall into a reactive pattern. They hit a rough financial patch and they send out a letter that says something like, "Dear member, we urgently need more money or the church might close." There's no mention of vision in that. There's no reference to God's work or to our faithful response. Instead, there's just a pervasive sense of panic. And not surprisingly, that doesn't tend to inspire people to give. Instead, what we want to do is to tell the story of what God is doing in your church and community, and to invite people to be a part of that. There's a quote I love from theologian Henry Nouwen who says, "When we seek to raise funds, we are not saying, 'Please, could you help us out because lately it's been hard.' Rather, we are declaring, 'We have a vision that is amazing and exciting.' We are inviting you to invest yourself through the resources that God has given you, your energy, your prayers, and your money, in this work to which God has called us." So that quote leads us nicely into our first E, which is encourage, sharing the story of your church in a way that is engaging, uplifting, and clearly shows why your church matters. One of the things that you can do to help encourage is to present your church's finances in a more engaging way. A tool you can do to use to do this is sometimes called a narrative budget or occasionally a missional budget. You can find lots of examples of this by searching for those terms online. So this tool, which is often presented in a brochure form or in a slide presentation, shows how your church is living out its mission, how you are being the hands and feet of Christ in your community, and what it costs in practical terms to do that. So how do we create one? To share your financial story in this more engaging way, you first need to identify the key mission and ministry areas that your church focuses on. These are broad aspects of the life of the church, and they might include things such as those shown on screen. For example, worship, pastoral care and support, children and youth ministry, outreach, service to the community. One way to identify your mission and ministry areas is to make a list of all of your church's activities. Everything from your Sunday services to toddler groups to food banks to prayer meetings, pastoral visits, and so on. Look to see if there are any sort of common themes that emerge. You might see, for example, that your church prioritizes justice or connection or service. Another good option is to ask people in your congregation what it is that makes the church important to them. You'll probably start to hear some patterns emerge. People might say how welcoming the church is, or how they feel uplifted and transformed by worship, or how supported they have felt in times of need. It's important to remember here that things like buildings, administrative costs, or giving to grow contributions are not mission or ministry areas in themselves. Rather, they are the practical means that support the church's mission and ministry. So, once you have identified your sort of key mission and ministry areas, the next step is to allocate your expenditure to those areas. So, for example, let's say that your mission and ministry areas were worship, community, and Christian education. If you pay an organist, for example, you could allocate 100% of the organist's salary to worship. If you contract a cleaner for a few hours each week, you might split that cost among the 3 different areas. Some things are going to be a bit more complicated, like your building. You would need to estimate how much your building is used for each of these areas. Maybe it's used around 20% of the time for worship, 30% of the time for Christian education, and 50% of the time for community projects. You could then allocate that percentage of the total building costs to each of those areas. Admittedly, this is more of an art than it is an exact science. The aim is to demonstrate that your church's budget connects directly to your church's mission and ministry. And of course, the stewardship team is more than happy to help you get started. And let's just take a moment here to talk about giving to grow, because this one can feel tricky. What you'll want to do is break it down into its components. Ministry here, for example, relates to the cost of your allocated ministry. So where you have a minister or ministers in post, you can estimate how much of their work supports each mission area. For example, maybe your minister spends roughly 50% of their time on worship, 25% on Christian education, and 25% on community. Ministry elsewhere and shared activities support other churches across Scotland and help fund the support provided by the national offices. You might consider allocating these to a ministry area like supporting the wider church or building Christian community. This is just one way that you can think about giving to grow. And it's more informative than simply referring to the money we have to send to Edinburgh. Again, if you are not sure how to do this, don't worry. Your stewardship consultant is happy to help you. Once you have finished, what you should have is a list of mission and ministry areas with an estimated total cost and percentage of your overall budget attached to each. We understand that this method of allocating expenditure may not work for all churches, particularly those with complicated finances. And if this is you, then again, we recommend that you get in touch with the stewardship team and we can work with you to find a way to tell your story that is both clear and impactful. We do also find that churches that work with a member of the stewardship team tend to have the best outcomes. So after you've done that, now comes the fun part, which is telling the story. So for each of your mission and ministry areas, you want to write a short narrative that celebrates what your church is doing. Talk about the difference that your church makes. Mention the outreach that you offer. Describe what it is that makes worship meaningful. Share the joy of your youth ministry or the comfort that is provided through pastoral care. This is really where your church's identity can shine through. You can include real stories and quotes from people involved, or facts and figures that can illustrate your impact. And of course, include lots of photos because these are some of the most powerful storytelling tools that you have. Once you pull together your mission and ministry area descriptions and costings, you can create a brochure, a presentation, or a web page, something that you can share with your congregation. And later in the webinar, we'll show you the editable templates that will help you to do this. And this is just a sneak peek of what we're seeing here. But for now, just remember that a narrated missional budget helps people to see how their giving supports the work of Christ in the world. It makes the connection between faith and finance come alive. And again, if you need help getting started, your stewardship consultant is here to support you. So I will now hand over to Darren to tell you about our next E, which is engage.
Once you've developed your narrative budget and crafted your church's story, the next step is to think about how you will share your message in practical terms. And there are lots of ways you can do this: through events, during worship, by direct mail, through one-to-one conversations. The key thing is to reach your whole congregation with your message, and you can help prepare people's hearts and minds well in advance of the programme itself. Now, in marketing, they say that people need to hear a message 7 times before they take action. That sounds a bit excessive, but it highlights an important principle. People need to hear your message more than once and in different ways before it sinks in. You don't need to worry about overwhelming people because it's rare that a single person will see every message you send out. We recommend running the main part of your giving programme over a concentrated period, say 4 weeks, but you can start to promote that programme earlier than that. You should try to use a variety of communication methods. Think of it as creating a surround sound effect. When people hear the same message through worship, in a letter, on a poster, in a conversation, it really starts to sink in. Think of the ways you can communicate that suit your context and play to your strengths. You need a way of sharing your story with your whole church community. An attractive printed brochure can be highly effective. And as Kate said, we'll show you later how our templates can make that really easy for you. Or perhaps your congregation could use their creativity to do this in another way, such as by producing a video or creating a presentation. You also need a way to ground your programme in worship and an exploration of a Christian approach to giving. This could take the form of a sermon series on the theme of generosity. The stewardship team's Joyful Generosity materials provide 4 weeks' worth of sermon starters, prayers, and other worship ideas, as well as options for Bible study groups or personal devotions. And we generally find that programmes with a face-to-face element work best. This could take the form of a special event, a vision night, or a celebration dinner, where you share your church's story, where you look to the future, and where you invite a response. You could also consider personal contact, such as phoning or visiting members who aren't able to attend such an event, if that's right for your context. And it's a good idea to supplement these core elements with other forms of communication. How about a newsletter article, or direct emails, or posts on your church's social media, perhaps a short video from the minister? And be mindful of different people's needs. Some might live far away. Perhaps you have folk who only connect with your church online. For them, a letter or a phone call might not be the most appropriate. The goal is for everyone to hear the message in the way that makes sense for them. In just a moment, we'll walk you through a sample timeline of how you might put this programme together. But before that, Pauline's going to share about one of the most important parts of any stewardship programme, the ask.
Thanks, Darren. Even the most inspiring message won't lead to action unless we ask people directly to reflect and respond. For many of us, this can feel daunting. We might worry about asking for money or making people feel uncomfortable or embarrassed. I want to share a quote from Craig Satterley that might be helpful in reframing our approach to this aspect of stewardship. He writes, "When congregational leaders are convinced that what we are asking the congregation to give is a grateful response to and participation in God's own work in the world, we ask without apology, embarrassment, shame, or discomfort, because we trust God, who by the power at work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than all we can ask or imagine." So whether you're inviting someone to reflect on their giving during worship, in a letter, or face-to-face, remember this: we don't ask to make people feel guilty or to put pressure on them. We ask within the context of our shared faith and belief in the mission that we're all participating in and supporting. We ask trusting that the Holy Spirit will guide people in their decision-making around the offering, just as we have been guided. When we approach the ask in this way, we can ask with confidence and with a sense of peace. Here are a few examples of the ways in which you might frame your ask. These could be adapted for use in a covering letter, during an event or presentation, for during worship, or through other methods of communication. So you might put it like this: we're inviting everyone to think about their giving this year. Would you be open to reflecting on your giving and consider increasing your offering if you are able? Or we might say, as part of our stewardship season, we're inviting every member of the congregation to prayerfully consider their giving. How is God calling you to support the work of this church in the year ahead? Another approach might be, we're inviting you to reflect on your giving to the church. Your support helps make our shared ministry possible, from worship and pastoral care to outreach and community work. Or how about this? You've heard the difference we're making together as a church. We hope you'll consider supporting that work by filling out a response card, either tonight or in worship next week. As indicated by that final example, one of the most effective tools you can use to help with asking is a response card. We've created a template for you to adapt to your own context. This simple card allows people to confirm that they have reviewed their giving, to indicate how much they plan to give, if they're happy to be specific, to choose how they'd like to give, whether weekly or monthly, and whether by standing order or envelope, and to request more information about things like gift aid or legacy giving. These cards can be handed out during worship, at a special event, or they can be included in a stewardship pack. And it's important to include an envelope so that everyone can be confident their response will be handled confidentially. Ideally, you'll set a clear deadline for returning these cards, perhaps inviting people to bring them back on a special commitment Sunday when the congregation dedicates their responses together. Giving programs that use a response card almost always see better results. The card helps people pause, reflect, and decide, instead of simply putting the materials away to deal with another time. When you ask, make sure your message feels personal. If you're sending out letters or a brochure, address people by name rather than just "Dear Member." Show them that they are seen and valued. A personalised message helps people feel like they matter, and they do. It's also worth considering whether different groups in your congregation might benefit from slightly different messages. For example, if you have a distinct messy church congregation or an online worshipping community, you might consider if they would respond better to a message that highlights those particular ministries. You might also reflect on ways to thank people for their current contributions to the life and witness of the church. Fiona.
Thanks, Pauline. So, picking up on that point about thanking people, we all know the value of saying thank you when someone gives you a gift. And yet, many churches forget to thank people for their support, whether financial or otherwise. One of the most important parts of any stewardship programme is taking the time to thank everyone and then continuing to share your message throughout the year. So once you've received response cards, make sure to thank everyone who was contacted, not just those who responded. A tailored message for those who didn't respond, such as, "We're grateful you're on this exciting journey with us. If you'd still like to return your response card, there's still time. Here's how," can both express appreciation and be a gentle reminder for people to respond. Where possible, send personalised thank you notes. A handwritten card or a personal email says much more than a generic thank you message during worship or in a newsletter. It's fine to include those too, but a personal approach shows that you see people as individuals and really value their support. It's also vital to keep the message going once the programme is over. Share the results, how many people took part, how giving has changed, or what you're now able to do as a result. Throughout the year, continue telling stories of the church's impact. Use your newsletter, social media, or take time during worship to show people how people's giving is making a difference. For example, you might say, "Thanks to our giving as a congregation, we have been able to launch a new youth drop-in." Or, "Our offerings as a congregation helped cover the extra heating bills through the winter so that our halls could be used to offer warm spaces to support and engage with our wider community." Or, "We welcomed 10 new people to a community lunch this week. We're so grateful for the support that furthers our church's call to grow disciples." These actual examples reinforce the connection between giving and our mission, and they help to build a culture of gratitude and generosity. So, how do you pull these elements we've discussed, encouraging, engaging, enlarging and enhancing, into a giving programme? Here's just one example, which focuses on hosting a special event, followed by an opportunity to return response cards at a commitment Sunday service. Again, this is just an example to show you how these elements come together. you should choose an approach that makes sense for your context. So start to prepare at least 3 to 4 months before this kind of event. The actual timescale will depend on what your program looks like. Form a small team to plan and lead the program. They shouldn't be the ones to do everything. Others need to be involved too. But this team will plan the program and make sure everything comes together. Choose a key event or focus. As mentioned, perhaps a special dinner, a vision night, or an exhibition of all the work your church does. Draft your core materials. A letter, brochure, and response card are usually the main elements. And it's a good idea to start with the brochure as it contains the most information. About 6 weeks before your event, announce details of the program in worship, newsletters, emails, and social media. Building up the information as you get nearer the event helps to generate excitement and enthusiasm. About 3 or 4 weeks before, send out invitations and encourage people to attend the event. Everyone will know the dates in advance through your publicity, but invites are important to encourage everyone personally to come along, and ask people to RSVP if it's appropriate. It's important from the outset to start weaving the theme of generosity into worship and prayers. So the event itself. Hold your main event. Share a meal or refreshments. Food is always a great way of bringing people together to tell your story and show how giving makes a difference. Give out brochures and response cards at the event, and make sure you encourage people to reflect and respond to the message. It's a good idea to make up a pack in advance for each person you have invited, put their name on it, and hand it out as people arrive. The packs left over after your event will be for those who were unable to attend, and they can be delivered. Arrange for the collection of responses, or on the following Sunday or Sunday after, hold a commitment service where people can bring back their response cards during worship. And celebrate. You might want to hold a special service or invite people to stay for coffee afterwards. Or you could put together a thank you video, which you can show following worship or send out to those who weren't able to attend. Following up as soon as possible after the event is essential. So gently follow up with anyone who didn't respond. They might just have forgotten to return a response card. Send thank you notes, as we mentioned earlier, and remember to share the results and highlights in as many ways as possible. Keep updating everyone throughout the year. Keep the message alive. Again, this is only an example. There's no one-size-fits-all approach for a stewardship programme. We've provided a set of templates to help you plan, and Kate will go over those in a moment. But everything can be adapted to suit your own context and used in whatever way is best for you. Whatever approach you take, remember three key things. Share your story widely. Keep it simple, consistent, and clear. Invite people to prayerfully make a personal response. This is at the heart of a good stewardship programme. And involve the stewardship team. We are more than happy to work with your planning group through each step, or to simply offer encouragement and practical support as needed. Over to you, Kate.
Thanks. So, as we said before, to support you in developing your own program, we have created a series of templates that you can adapt for your own context. So these items include a brochure, a response card, which also includes an online option for returning the response card, an event invitation with an accompanying RSVP form, again online, a presentation that you could maybe use during an event, some different covering letters, and some sample social media posts. So after the webinar, we will send out a folder with links to all of these materials. We've also created a video that we will share as well which gives very detailed advice on how to use and adapt the templates. But first, we're going to now view a brief video that will give you a little tour and an overview of the different materials. I'm going to give a brief overview of the different resources that we have created. The Stewardship team has produced a range of templates and resources which you can mix and match to suit whatever sort of program your church develops. So after the webinar, we will send you a folder with links to all of these resources. All of the templates are either on Microsoft Word, Canva, or Microsoft Forms. Canva and Microsoft Forms are online platforms that are used by many churches already, and both of them offer free accounts. We've created a video showing you how to edit the resources on both of these platforms if you aren't already familiar with them, and we'll share that video when we send the other materials. But for now, I just want to give you an overview of the different materials. I've started here on Canva, and I first want to show you the brochure template. This is an A5 size brochure, which you can adapt and give to your congregation. Often having something to read and consider in their own time can be really important for helping individuals reflect on their giving. So as you can see, we have the cover here, a little cover letter that could come from the session or the minister, a page giving an overview of your church's spending, and then space for you to include some narrative descriptions and images for each of your mission and ministry areas. We've also included a page that challenges people to review their giving using a proportional giving chart. However, we've also created another set of alternate pages that you can use if you feel that one of these will suit you better. But going back to the brochure here, there's also a page with ways to give and a back cover with some contact details. So that's the brochure. The next item is a response card. So as we discussed earlier in the webinar, response cards are very effective at making people pause and consider their offering, rather than just putting it aside as something that they'll get to later. This response card features space for people to share information about their offering and also includes a little portion here that they can cut off and keep as a reminder. Next, we have an A5 invitation. This is something that can be adapted for any sort of event you are holding as part of your program, such as a vision night or commitment Sunday. We've also included a presentation, which you can use at such an event. So there are lots of different slides to pick and choose from, so I won't go through them here. But it gives an opportunity for you to share information about your church and for people to take time to discuss or reflect. And finally, from the Canva resources, we have a set of 4 different sample Facebook posts for you to use throughout the program. And in addition to these resources on Canva, there are 2 Microsoft form templates, which I won't show you here, but one is an RSVP form that you can use to collect digital RSVPs from your invitation. And the other is a digital version of the response card if you want to give people the opportunity to submit their card digitally. And we also have 3 different letters here for you to look through and potentially use, including one that gives an introduction to the program. The second that is a cover letter for your main pack if you're choosing to give people a brochure and a response card. And then the final one is a thank you letter. And then we've also included all of the joyful generosity materials here, which tie in with the program as a whole. So we have included worship resources here. So worship starters for 4 Sundays in the program, some devotionals, and Bible studies. And we really hope that you find these resources helpful and easy to use. If you feel that there is anything else that would be useful to you, please do just let us know. And similarly, if at any time you have difficulty, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Stewardship team.
Let me come full circle to the story of unfolding generosity. As Paul wrote to the church in Corinth, the most generous God is more than extravagant with us. God gives us something we can then give away so that we can be generous in every way. God's generosity invites us into generosity. And our prayer is that as you use these resources in your congregation, they may enable your congregation to be generous in every way, producing with us great praise to God. So we now have an opportunity for questions. Just to give you a little moment to have an opportunity to type in your questions, I'm going to spring a question onto one of my colleagues. So I wonder if I might ask someone to describe what support can the stewardship team offer in running a giving programme in a local congregation?
Well, we're all jumping to answer this one, aren't we? Thanks, Darren. And Darren didn't give us warning of this. We like to be really flexible. You know, we appreciate that every congregation is different, and we don't come in with a set programme these days. Where you're wanting to do a money programme, we would probably want to have an early conversation with the, you know, if you have a stewardship group, maybe with the minister and the treasurer and session clerk, just to hear about your congregation, to hear your story, and to get a sense of your own context and what approach might work best. We have some resources which really encourage the sharing of stories, involving your people, helping them feel that they have ownership of this process. We have the resources that have been presented to you tonight to support a focused, perhaps more traditional approach, which you know, might feel like a lot of work, but actually does produce really good results. Challenging people to think about their giving, providing them with good communications. So we can help, you know, there are some churches that are very well resourced with people who can do all of those things. There are other congregations who need our input a little bit more. We can help with very practical things around producing those kind of documents and brochures and letters. If anyone else wants to chip in, I'll stop there.
No, I think that's pretty comprehensive. I maybe just wanted to add that practically speaking, we are all based roughly around the sort of presbyteries that we look after. So we're always happy to come along and meet you in person as well, if that's best. Or again, often it's useful to have just an initial chat on Teams or on a phone call, just to sort of hear what your circumstances are, what you're thinking about, that kind of thing.
And you've seen all of the consultants on the screen tonight. So to put faces to names, if you're in the presbyteries of North East and the Northern Isles or Clare LNE, then Fiona is your regional consultant. In Clyde, Perth or Fife, it's Kate. In Glasgow, Forth Valley and Clydesdale or the Southwest, it's me. In Edinburgh and West Lothian, Lothian and Borders, England and the Channel Islands, Jerusalem or international, it's Pauline. So any of us are always happy to help you. You can contact us directly, or you can contact us at stewardship@churchofscotland.org.uk. But we have a question in from Alistair Bruce, who asks, when you say that churches have seen a 20 to 30% increase, how have you quantified this? What would the baseline have been? Is it purely Sunday giving and the active congregation, or is it spread across nominal members too? There are a couple of follow-up questions, but I'll maybe pause there and ask just that one. Where does that figure of 20 to 30% increase come from? Fiona.
Perhaps I can come in there. What we would have done, certainly in the past, is looked at what the offering income was before a programme and then looked at it after a programme, not directly, not in the year of the programme, because that's too many things that can skew the figures to get an accurate figure. So we would have looked at the programme, the income the year after the programme, and that's where we saw that kind of responses from. And it has to be said that the churches, and we're not blowing our own trumpet here, but the churches who worked alongside a stewardship consultant did see a bigger increase than those who did it without the help of a stewardship consultant. So it was all kinds of giving. It wasn't just active members or confined to any particular area. It was all offerings that were taken into consideration, because we would encourage this to go out to everyone that you feel is part of your church, whether their name is on a member's roll or you see them very much as part of your church family. We'll look at all the offerings that come in. So that's how we got to that figure. I'll pass over to someone else for the next bit.
The next question we have is, how do you recommend printing or producing these documents, the brochure and the response card and so on? Is it via a printing company or print locally? Kate, I'll maybe come to you with that.
Yeah.
There's some guidance that people will receive in the information about this, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. So there is a sort of covering document in the folder that we're going to send out where we give a little bit of advice about how to print these things. We do recommend working with a professional printer. So as the questioner said, that could be something like Vistaprint or SoloPress, an online provider, or your local printer. But the reason we recommend that is because oftentimes people don't expect this, but it usually works out cheaper to order from a print company like that than it is to do it yourself. And the results tend to be more attractive as well. So in that guidance document, we give a couple of recommendations and we give you the specific print specifications that you are going to need to give to your printer.
Great. And again, if anyone needs any help with any of that, you can feel free to get in touch with us. Our next question is, can you explain what you mean by the congregation? Is that just the worshipping congregation, or is it broader than that? Pauline, can we come to you on that one?
Yes, certainly. I think this would be a decision for you to take locally. My view is involve as many people as you can. If you're thinking primarily about the offering, then I guess primarily it will be the people who are on your roll or who attend, on a regular enough basis. But I would also encourage you to think of stewardship as an opportunity for mission as well. It can be a way of inviting more people to participate within the life of the church. So if you are having a sort of event, a special event where you're celebrating the life of the church, why not invite, people there to represent some of the hall users, the people that you deal with week by week, who are part of your church community, and who are invested in the life of the church, even although you might not always see them on a Sunday morning. So it's really a local decision based on what kind of program it is that you're running, and how you want to engage and encourage and enthuse more people to feel that they're part of your church family.
Thanks, Pauline. Our next question might resonate with a number of people. As you know, we're going through a time of great change across the church. And Martin asks, as part of a parish with two churches that have combined, where there's a perception of different styles and characteristics which they're trying to unify, would we suggest different flexible approaches or one unifying campaign, or indeed one event? Has anyone got any thoughts there on what we do where there's been a union of congregations? Fiona?
I think you do have to be sensitive, because it can be difficult when churches come together and don't necessarily agree on the way forward. But I do think it's a great opportunity to encourage bringing everyone together. So it very much depends on the individual situation. But I would definitely be looking to try and have an event or something that brings people together, but allowing for perhaps the different approaches as well. So But I definitely wouldn't be suggesting you'd have two completely separate things and two separate messages. I would definitely be encouraging everyone to come together. I don't know if anyone's got anything else to add to that.
Darren?
I think we've all found in situations of union that either in the immediate build up to a union or just as a union has happened can be a really good time to engage in a program like this. People can be helped to look towards the future. That exercise of looking at everything your church does and the mission and ministry areas that you engage with, it can be a really good opportunity for everyone to find out what the whole of your united congregation gets up to and sees the totality of what God is doing in your place. So these can be a real stepping stone towards looking to the future as well. Our next question asks from Ross, what is the best way to engage with those who mainly join worship through streaming?
Yeah, I might be able to speak to that a little bit, which is, I think that if you've got a really strong digital audience, you're going to be focusing mostly on sort of digital forms of communication. So if you happen to have email addresses for these folks, that's a really great thing to include or to use rather to share information about the program with them. But otherwise, I would be really focusing on using social media effectively and spending time in your worship services that are being streamed, really emphasizing the importance of giving. And feel free to, remark on the fact that people who watch the streaming services are also valued members of the community as well, so that you're not really drawing a distinction between those who just watch streaming and those who attend in person. That's just my initial view. Would anyone like to add to that?
Maybe just to say that if you get in touch with us, we can point you in the direction of other congregations that have quite a big online membership and can maybe share some examples of what they've done if it's helpful to see something that someone else has already done. Our next question is from Peter, who asks, how should we encourage our Kirk session to consider stewardship? Peter says he's asked for a stewardship campaign over many years without success. And with reserves from a man's sale, he's concerned people seem to rest on their laurels rather than look to God for growth. So what can we do to encourage a Kirk session to take a look at this?
Well, just on Saturday, I joined a Kirk session who were having a conference event, and they very kindly invited me to have the first hour of that event. And together we thought about, how do we develop a culture of generosity in our congregation? What does stewardship mean to us? And it was clear that it means a whole host of different things. And we kind of explored that a bit. So that's a really good way of helping a Kirk session to feel that they are thinking things through for themselves. They're not being imposed with some program that they don't want to take up. But it can also help them see the benefits of having that vision for generosity within the life of their church. I'll hand over to someone else. Thanks.
I would maybe just add to that as well, just really emphasizing the fact that, stewardship and giving is not separate from our discipleship. As we discussed earlier in the webinar, and as Pauline has said there, it's also it's a critical element of what it means to be a Christian. And so if we're neglecting to explore this together, then we're saying that basically that's not a part of our lives that we're going to welcome God into. So I think just helping people make that connection as much as possible by using some of those stories and resources is a key element.
Well, thank you, everyone. There are no other questions that we've been notified of. So unless anyone wants to quickly get a last minute one under the wire, then we'll be good stewards of time and we will finish early and give you some of your evening back. We will be in touch over the next few days with the resources that you have. If you're watching the recording afterwards and you haven't signed up to receive those resources, you can send an email to stewardship@churchofscotland.org.uk or follow the links in the notes underneath the video, and that will get you to those resources. So really just to say thank you to everyone for joining us, and we hope that we'll get to chat to you soon to see how we can support you in your congregation.